Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? I have a voice that does not carry very well. Does this help? Yeah, okay. So thank you for having me. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm really in particular happy to present to you because Brownie is your hometown hero. He's personal to you. So it's very important to me, and was very important to me from the moment that I found out about Brownie's story, that if you were local and didn't know his story, that you would be enlightened after hearing about his story. So again, my name is Kelly Nelson, and we do have a very special guest who is going to be presenting in just a little bit. I'll kind of break up the presentation where I'll tell you a little bit about the Dogs for Defense program from World War II, tell you just a little bit about how I heard about the story, and then I'll have Joan come up to talk a little further. But my special guest is Joan Yore, and Joan, if you wouldn't mind standing up. So Joan, so Orrin Kenley, who is the little boy in the book, Joan is his niece. And Joan protected Brownie's war dog memorabilia for over 50 years, well over 50 years, to make this even a possibility. So she'll be talking a little bit, and we do believe that Joan is the last person alive to have known Brownie. So very special indeed. So anyway, without further ado, so here's a picture of Brownie. By show of hands, how many people knew of Brownie's gravesite at the King Veterans Home? Okay, so 2024 marked 75 years since the passing of Brownie. And when I had found out about Brownie's story, it was at a really painful time. My dad had advanced dementia, and we needed to find a care facility for him. So we were touring the Veterans Home, and we went through, it was very interesting, I think, in hindsight. We went on the wrong tour. We got there, my dad was a gym teacher for years and years, and he was 89 at this point. He was a Korean War veteran. And so when I told the receptionist we were there to visit the lockdown kind of dementia ward, she said, "Is that your dad?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Oh no, you need to be on the independent living tour." So, which is not at all where he ended up being placed, but it was serendipitous because I was able to see the museum. And the museum had on a foam core signage just saying that it wasn't all just men who served. And then when I read the story, I just thought, it was just such a lovely thing. I'm such an animal lover, and I connected with the story from so many different angles. And I thought, if this had not been written about, I was just hoping that I could be the person to write about it. So anyway, so here is Brownie, and he was born in 1941. He was a German Shepherd mix, and Joan tells us, and her sister Vicky is here as well, Orrin's other niece, but Brownie was even part wolf, that they believed that he had a little bit of wolf in him. So here he is. This was a photo from the Veterans Home after his wartime service, but just to give you an idea of what he did look like. Are many of you familiar with the Dogs for Defense program from World War II? So I thought it was very interesting. Once I dug in and was doing more research in earnest, I found out about this program. So during World War II, this was the first time that dogs were to be used in military. In other countries, they had used dogs, but never in U.S. Any wartime had our military utilize dogs. And the more I thought about it, I think how it came together makes sense. So the Dogs for Defense was a civilian group. It was brought together by dog enthusiasts. There was a poodle enthusiast from New York. Her name was Dorothy Erlinger. And she was very well connected with a lot of celebrities, and she was a very moneyed person, and so it was easy for her to kind of get the word out and get the attention. So if you have ever taken dog training classes, it's interesting because in the beginning classes you use your voice, and then you start to bring in hand signals, and then as you get in the upper ranks of obedience training, you take your voice away and you're just using your hands to signal the dog. So I think that there was a lot of crossover with the dog training enthusiasts, that they thought this would probably pair well with military use. So they basically pitched the idea to the US military, and they started recruiting. And so it was a very interesting kind of a format. They advertised directly to children. basically it was saying, what can you do? You're young, but what could you do to help win the war? And one of the things that you could do is to donate your family pet, which is, it sounds excruciating by today's standards. I think you'd be hard pressed to find any child, let alone adult, that would donate their dog, knowing that they could be harmed or potentially not come home to you. Here's an example of one of the advertisements, and everything was through Purina. And that is mainly the avenue that folks went through, as far as there was a coupon, which you can see in the lower corner, left-hand corner. And what you did is, if you were interested, you sent in that coupon. And then you received a questionnaire to fill out. The major thing that they wanted to know was, your dog afraid of noises? So that's what Orrin did. He had to fill out that paperwork, send it in, and then if your dog passed that review, then they asked for your dog to be sent to a receiving and training center. So here is an example of kind of like I don't want to use the word propaganda, but in a sense it sort of was, in a sense, but it really was a direct appeal to children. So I found this book at an antique store, but this is Private Pepper, and so it was a fictional character that was invented by the powers that be as far as marketing, and this was to reach kids, to kind of say, here's a little boy, he donated his dog. It had a similar storyline as far as like with Brownie coming home. So, that was something that was also used to reach children. So this is Chips, and Chips was the most decorated World War II war dog. He was part German Shepherd, and he was in Italy. And the story goes that he saved his group of soldiers, his battalion, because he disobeyed his handler, and he found a nest of snipers, and he was able to have them apprehended, and he saved the lives of them. So he actually received a Purple Heart. But it was removed, it was taken away, because there were many people that were outraged that an animal would get this award. So it was taken away, but he did receive the Dickens Medal, and that's the highest award acknowledgement that an animal can receive. And you can see they also made a comic strip. So the other distinction that Chips has is that he bit President Eisenhower. So war dogs were not friendly dogs at the time, and at the time that President Eisenhower approached him, he was still in his war dog mode, and he bit him. So that's Chips. Something upon like a lot of research, when I had come across this, I thought it was worth mentioning that at the time there was no dry dog food. That because the wet dog food cans, they wanted the metal for the scrap metal drives and things, so they wanted to stop production for dog food in cans. And so instead, this is when dry dog food kibble came to be, which I thought was very interesting and worth mentioning. So this is Armin Orrin Kendley, Vicki and Joan's uncle, and he would be approximately 10 years old here, and this was the age that he was when he donated his dog, which I think is very remarkable. Oh, what's that, Joan?
No, he was 10 years old when he got the dog.
Oh, when he got the dog, excuse me.
I'm
okay.
sorry.
No, that's fine. I was just going to see something here. Okay, I'm going to just talk a little bit more, Joan, and then we'll switch gears. So this is Marie Adler-Stone, and she is a terrier enthusiast, and I spoke to her granddaughter, who said that she was not a warm and fuzzy grandma. Does that surprise anyone? No. And I think something that was interesting about Marie is her ex-husband was one of the founding family members from the Boston store. Do you remember the Boston store from years ago? So yes, she was a Milwaukee representative. So she was within this group of recruiters, and so most likely Orrin would have, when you were going through the paperwork process, after you received your formal admittance, you probably would have worked with a regional recruiter like Marie Adler-Stone. Okay, so I think now would be a good time to introduce Joan, and we'll talk a little bit about your experience with Brownie. Would that be okay?
Sure.
Okay.
If I can gracefully get up on the chair.
Nobody's watching.
Yeah.
The sun is kind of bright, so I'm gonna walk over here.
Okay, you can hold on.
It's so fun getting old. My husband and I have discovered that we retired so we could support the doctors. Okay. My grandma lived in King and she worked at the home. And when Brownie came home, they sent a list of things that Orrin was not supposed to command Brownie to do, like sick him, of course, he wouldn't do that, and different things, and what to feed him and everything. And before they sent him home, they sent him a letter asking if they wanted the dog back, and saying that they untrained him for war, but they didn't know if any of that would surface. But Uncle Orrin wanted his dog back, so they sent him back. So he got him back. Brownie would, like I said, Grandma worked at the home. She was a cook over there. And Brownie would walk her to work, and he'd lay out on the steps for a little while, and then he'd make all the rounds in the home. And back then they had little cottages, like little cottages for the vets, and he'd make all the rounds there. And Grandma said, I never had to feed him, he was always full. So, and then when it was time for her to come home, he'd meet her at the door and walk her home. And he was just a good dog. And he didn't like me much. Brownie and I grew up together. We were young together. He was just a puppy. He was just a little ball of fur like that. I have a picture of Uncle Orrin when he got him. And I was in my walker, and I had the Cadillac of walkers, which was a stroller too. So I had fenders on it, and it was quite bulky. Well, I ran over his paw with that, and he never forgave me. And I loved that dog. I wanted to hug him and pet him, and grrr, you know. He'd make me walk around him. And I just never got to pet him, and he never forgave me for that, even when we got older. So anyway, when my grandma got older and had to go into a home, we were cleaning her house, and Uncle Orrin had Brownie's pictures upstairs in his room. By then, my uncle was gone. But I knew he had papers up in his room, so I went up there because I had another relative, well, the other uncle, was part of a gray wolf, or sheep, we used to say gray sheep of the house, family, and I didn't trust him. And I thought maybe he would get a hold of those papers, and I didn't trust him. I thought maybe he'd sell them or something, because that's the way he was. So Grandma gave me some Victorian pictures of her as a girl and her mom and dad. And these pictures, you know, Victorian, they were this high and this wide. Those were big things, big Victorian pictures with everything. And in the back of one of them, they had just some old plywood, and it was kind of partly open. So I went and got Brownie's papers, and I tucked it in behind the picture. And then when I carried it out, my uncle asked me what I was doing with those pictures, and I said, well, Grandma gave them to me, because she did, because nobody else in the family wanted them. So that's how I got the papers out, and I kept them all these years, and didn't know much what to do with them. So this blessing over here for our family, and you are a blessing.
Thank you.
So she got me roiled up on this subject. She's responsible for getting the statue that's going to be dedicated. I always wanted a picture of Brownie up by his grave, but the guy at the cemetery said, no, you can't do that, because then everybody else will want a picture. So I never thought of a statue, but Kelly came along and had a new view on things. So anyway, that's how that happened. So, and then I wrote a story about my grandma. When lilacs bloom, I did the history, and that came about. Oh, I was gonna tell you, where the statue's gonna be up at the home, it overlooks a rainbow, it'll overlook Rainbow Lake. And years ago, my uncle and his buddies used to go sledding there because it was all open. Now they got a gate, a fence up there and everything. But that was all open, you could go right down on the lake. So he took me there, he took me sledding one day, I think I was 5. And he was my favorite uncle. And on the way home, I said, Uncle Laura, will you wait for me to grow up so I can marry you? And he said, I'm your uncle. And he said, I don't think that's going to work. So, but I loved him anyway. And in the 50s, he joined the Air Force. And he was stationed over in England at Liverpool, and he met my Aunt Beryl over there, and he married her. A couple of years later, they had Allison, and he got a leave of absence, and came home for a visit. Visited all his friends and everybody. And one morning he got up, he didn't feel good. And he laid down, and after a while he couldn't hardly move. So they took him into Waupaca here, and doctors didn't know what was going on, they couldn't figure that out. So one of the doctors got in touch with the Air Force, somebody, I don't know, somebody from the Air Force. And they told him to take an ambulance and take him up to Warsaw. So they flew in a jet and took him down to the Great Lakes Naval Base. And this happened in, September. And he was there in October yet. And he had a brain tumor. And when he was 17, he was in an accident in Appleton. And of course, he didn't have seatbelts then. So he hit his head on the curb, and they figured that it took that long to form. And then in November, he passed away at the age of 25. So Aunt Beryl went back to England and remarried, and Alice and her husband Kevin come and visit a lot. So she didn't know her father that much, but she does now. So that's part of our story and heritage. And I thank Kelly for it. And Jason.
So how much older was your uncle than you?
Than me?
Yeah, how
We
many?
were 10 years apart. He was born in 32 and I was born in 42. So I think I was about 5 when I proposed, but it didn't work out. He was a kind person. He was wonderful. So
When Brownie came back, did Orrin have any comments about how Brownie had changed?
no, because the training took, and Brownie was a good dog. He didn't bark anymore. That's the reason why Grandpa, he found this ad in the paper about donating your dog, and I'm sure Uncle Orrin didn't want to do it. But he let him go. And he was fine. But he still growled at me. It must have been the wolf part, that's all I can figure out. So, but I figure, well, if he's in heaven and when I get up there, by golly, I'm hugging that dog. So anyway, and another thing, and Kelly didn't include it in her book, it would have probably been too long. My aunt and uncle owned a tavern between Reedfield and Dale on a corner of Highway 10 and D. There was a tavern there. And now it's a roundabout, and over on the side there, that's where people park their cars now because the tavern's not there. But anyway, Uncle Orrin went one day to visit him, took Brownie along. And my mouth is so dry.
There's a bottle of water right below there. Joan, on the shelf just below.
Oh,
Yeah, go ahead and drink it if you'd like to take a drink.
I'll be all right. Brownie decided he was gonna go home by himself, and he got lost. He was gone for 6 months. And Uncle Lauren was just heartbroken. Come to find out, Brownie ended up in Waupaca. That's where he spent his 6 months, walking the streets and getting fed by everybody. The kids loved him, and there was a few people that wanted the constable to shoot him because he didn't like it for some reason. But the constable said, "I'm not shooting him, he's a good dog." So anyway, Brownie made the rounds and made a lot of friends, and people would invite him in the house, and he'd stay there, and they'd feed him and everything. Once he got hit by a car, and the local veterinarian fixed him up. And I was thinking, I was wondering why that veterinarian never noticed the tattoo. We figured it should have been in his ear. They did mention the hip, but why would you do that?
Yeah, how would that gentleman
That
see?
wouldn't work.
Yeah.
Apparently, the dog wasn't hurt up on the head, probably a paw or something, who knows, but anyway. And one day, he was at this one place, and this lady's grandson came home from the service, and he was petting Brownie, and he noticed the tattoo, and he gave Brownie a command, and he obeyed. And he told his grandma, he says, "I wonder if this dog has been in the service." And she happened to mention to him that she said, "Well, there's a family in King that's looking for a dog that they got lost and stuff." So she wrote the number down, and she got in touch with the armed forces. And sure enough, it was Brownie's owner, it was Orrin Kinley. And Uncle Lauren came and got him, and Brownie went crazy even before the car got down the street. So that was the best reunion anybody would have seen. So he took him home, and they went hunting. Orrin didn't, I don't think he went hunting, but he went fishing and stuff, and the dog and everything. And then one day he was hit and run driver. But Grandma always told us that there was a neighbor way down the road that didn't like Brownie for some reason, and he's the one that hit him. And he came and said, "Well, I hit your dog, but I threw him in the ditch so you can go get him." And Grandma was so mad. Oh, whenever she told that story, she'd get so mad. You know, why didn't he bring him home, you know, and everything. And I don't know if he did it on purpose or what. We'll never know. But Uncle Lauren was going to bury him in the backyard. And the commandant heard about it. In fact, Brownie always visited the commandant because they, in King, there's what would you call it, a two-door house. It's the red brick house, but the front is like this, and it's made of brick. Well, that's where the commandant, the house is still there. And he said, he called, got in touch with Orrin, and he said he's going to be buried with the veterans because he's a vet. And so they found this little patch. It's a little diamond triangle with pine trees on it. It's really a beautiful setting. And he was given full service with the guns and everything. So he's still there, and his grave is the most visited. And I always wanted a picture of him up there so kids would know what he actually looked like, you know, but I couldn't do that. So I'm glad the statue's going up. And that's a representative for all the dogs that serve. So,
Boy, if that dog could talk.
yeah,
Sounds like he had quite the adventuresome life.
yeah, he did, yeah.
Was he in Europe?
He was in the South Pacific, and he got shot in the eye by a Japanese bullet, and with the left eye. Now, I don't know if it was a medic or an actual vet, I don't know, but they gave him a glass eye. And you couldn't tell. You couldn't tell it wasn't his real eye. It looked just normal.
How long did he serve?
It was about a year and a half.
Year and a half, yeah. So he was a young dog, because he was barking. But the thing of it was, when I saw the young pictures, it looked like Grandpa put him tied him up in a tree and outside, and put a chair out there. Well, he's a house dog. You know, no wonder he barked. He barked at the dogs, he barked at the people, and everybody got mad and said they didn't want him around. So it wasn't the dog's fault. So his idea was, well, his attitude wasn't all that great. He said, I hope he didn't say this to Orrin, but he said it to Grandma, well, if he comes back, it's okay, and if he don't, that's okay. You know, well, I hope he didn't say that in front of Orrin, but that was Orrin's a dog. So, anyway, thank you for all coming. It's nice of you to honor this and honor the writer. So,
All right.
Thank you, Joan. So as far as where Joan was saying that Brownie was in the, he was in the Pacific Theater, which is just meaning the islands, that a lot of the battles took place on different islands. And the value of World War II war dog was, they equated it to about 6 soldiers, that they had a value of about 6 soldiers worth with what they could prevent and what they could, actively do to help. And so, and even the enemy many times knew which ones were the war dogs, and they had bounties on their heads. So they knew that, a battalion that had a war dog was well protected. So Brownie did pass as far as all of his physical examinations. When they had him sent out to Fort Robinson, Nebraska, they examined him to make sure that he had to be a certain height, he had to be a certain weight. The government asked for about 20,000 purebred dogs initially when this program, the Dogs for Defense, came to be, but there were probably not 20,000 purebred dogs in the country at the time. So they had to adjust their expectations because that was a time in our country where there were a lot of mixed breeds, a lot of mutts. And so they started accepting the mixes like Brownie. So anyway, so here's an example as far as the sentry dogs. That's what they did. They were guard dogs. They were sniffing all the time, they were watching, but not barking. So like Joan said, he was in service for about a year and a half, and so here is after when he came home, and there's,
Kelly.
yes?
see his left eye? That's the glass eye.
Yeah, it looks real.
Yes.
Yeah, it really does.
Sorry, Kelly.
No, that's fine. So this would be an example of the paperwork that Joan had preserved, that she squirreled out from under her relatives. I love that story. But here is his honorable discharge paperwork, and it lists his tattoo. And Joan donated all of these items. All of the original paperwork went to the Wisconsin Veterans Museum in Madison. So these were scans that I had to acquire from them. Here's the paperwork as far as coming into the train depot. Mike? Yeah. So I just think it's so interesting to even just see, like, with the typewriter and all of those things. So all of that is the very original paperwork of Brownie's return to King. As she mentioned too, they had a list of instructions as far as what to feed them, what to do, what not to do. What happened with the dogs is when they came back to these after their wartime, then they came back to that same receiving center where he had been trained to be a military dog, to be a war dog. And the training involved one handler doing everything for the dog, all the feeding, all of the grooming, so that the dog started to see the other people, even within the battalion, in a different light. It really was transitioning him from being a family dog to a war dog. And then afterward, they had to basically demilitarize the dogs, and they had to transition them back to experiences that they would experience in family life. So here's, oh yeah.
How do you detransition a dog back to family life?
A lot of it was just as far as, desensitizing, as far as the reactivity. They would have them be in circumstances that were typical, you know, where their children that were present, noises, circumstances, everything they tried to mimic of what a family dog would experience to try to help them transition back to that. And that was not always the case. There were dogs that were not able to transition successfully back that had to be euthanized. So, and it was also one of the reasons why after World War II, the military took over the breeding, the training of U.S. military dogs. Everything changed after this. So World War II really was kind of like a pilot program, a very unique circumstance. So here's Brownie sunning himself. And as Joan said, here he is with the glass eye, but he was just a very handsome dog. Here he is hanging out at the veterans home with a couple of veterans. So I love the idea of him being, he was really just an unofficial therapy dog, you know, really a precursor to today's licensed therapy dogs. Yes?
Where did they live in King?
I was going to bring that up later. I'm glad that you're asking. No, not at all. So do you all know where Urban Roots Salon is? That was the Kenley home. So that was where Brownie and Orrin lived. And Joan and I were recently there because when the owners found out that their home or their salon was the site of the Kenley home, they were super excited. So Joan was kind enough to frame pictures of the home, what it looked like back in the 40s, and then they were asking, well, where did he typically go to lay down? And so there was a spot where she pointed to. Was that the porch?
Under the dining room table.
Okay, that's where that was. So that was fun. That was a cool tie-in, you know, with something from so long ago, and to think that it has some relevance today. That is Joan and Vicky's grandfather, Palmer, and I just thought that was a really cool picture of Brownie. Does anybody know that Indian Crossing Resort area? I posted this on Facebook, and people were posting, you know, like tagging other people that were familiar from this area. Is it the casino area? Is that by the Indian Crossing? Okay.
They used to have big bands there, like Benny Goodman and all them.
Really?
Indian Crossing. It was a bar nightclub thing.
Huh.
Yeah.
Too bad Benny Goodman didn't get a picture with Brownie. That would have been cool. So here's Joan. This was shortly after I had met her. And when I started to research, I found out that Orrin had passed away. And I just started calling family members, and they said, oh, you'll want to talk to Joan. She's our family historian. So that was how I connected with Joan, and we've just had a wonderful friendship so far, like a real blessing. So this is the sign that I had initially seen when we were on the accidental tour. So this is from the museum just outside the library in the Martin Center. And that's Orrin, and beautiful eyes. Bright blue eyes. So the artist made sure that the little boy's eyes in the book were very, very much to match.
Now see, I wanted to marry you.
So Joan and I were at King, must have been last June. And so this is Ethan, and he is the marketing specialist from the Wisconsin Historical Society Press. And so that is the flag that was folded at the full military funeral of Brownie. And it's remained at the library ever since. Did you say that your family thought that
I think Uncle Lauren donated it.
for people to see?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that remains there, so I thought that was pretty cool. And here we are by Brownie's grave marker. And as you'll notice, it says A Veteran's Best Friend. So that's where the title of the book came from. So this is the illustrator. So this is Aaron Boyd, and he is a Milwaukee resident, and he's just fantastic. He has done probably, 20 children's books. So this was not quite as, it was always, I'm sure, a big deal to have a book come out, but he was just wonderful. And yeah, so he's been doing some presentations as well. Everything is hand-drawn. So Aaron works from a very big canvas, and then he has software. He has a scanner, and he scans portions, and then the software knits everything together, stitches it. That's the word. He clicks a button that says stitch, and it pulls all the pieces together. But he said he can't work on a small canvas. It's just how his brain, so he works from very large canvases. So that is Aaron. And that is it for that. But one kind of recent thing that's happened with the Brownie story, which was very unexpected to me, is the relevance to today. So there's an individual, her name is Yaya, she's Greek. Yaya meaning grandma in Greek, but she is a Stitch. She has a service dog, she's a veteran, and she's a part of the American Legion's riders, so she's a Harley babe. She has a sidecar for her service dog, and he has doggles. So they roll up and they do a lot of work with the Wisconsin National Guard. The Wisconsin National Guard has a children and youth development program, and they put on programs for children many times who have a deployed parent or family member. They have found that Brownie's story has great relevance and connection to today. Like I said, it never really would have occurred to me. This was kind of brought to my attention. What they've been doing is they've been including the Brownie book with all of the kits that go to children when they have a family member deployed. Because what happened to Brownie is happening to their loved one. They are going to service, they will come back altered, many times physically, many times mentally. They need the time to readjust, to be introduced back slowly kind of into their world, and they have to find a new mission, much like Brownie did. So her goal is to put this book in the hands of every family member of a deployed Wisconsin veteran and serviceman woman. So it's been amazing. So yeah, were there any questions?
Was Brownie's name Brownie when in the Army, when she was in service?
According to his honorable discharge, yes. It said Brownie on there. And there were many Brownies. One of the biggest frustrations, one of the biggest challenges was I was never able to find the handler that was Brownie's handler, because the Dogs for Defense was a civilian program, and so the Army did not track the handler teams. They kept track of the dogs because they were soldiers, but they did not keep track of who the handler was assigned to them. So I went down every rabbit hole I could think of to try to find the information. My hope is that somehow Brownie's handler's family member might put the pieces together, but yeah, that did not happen. So that was a challenge. Another challenge was getting the book published. It took 5 years, and that's a long time. When you think of how something is in 2019, that was when I submitted the proposal, but then COVID happened and there were a lot of delays. So this was just something that I was really passionate about, and I just felt like it needed to be not a piece of forgotten history. And I'm so glad that the Wisconsin Historical Society Press agreed with me, and they put it together in such a beautiful fashion so that he won't be forgotten, because that was my goal.
You said there were thousands of dogs that were used in the war, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
So are there any other memorials like this or books written about dogs?
So there's one that was written by a gentleman out in Nebraska, and it was called Major, and that was a dog that served in Italy. But the way that they did it, there was not a lot of information about it, so it was very fictionalized, where this book is a children's picture book based on the true life. Without knowing the handler and some of the first-hand things, there were certain things that I had to try to fill in. But this book was a little different in the sense that it was very fictionalized. But it was interesting in a lot of the research that I did, that many of the people that were children at the ages when their dogs were donated, they still cry to this day, because many a times they would have to crawl into the shipping crate at the train station to coax the dog in. The dog would trust them, get into the crate, and then they were in their 70s and 80s and still very much affected by that, which I thought was very
I was
touching.
going to say Oren was just as brave.
Absolutely.
As far as we know, Brownie's the only dog buried in a veteran's cemetery.
In the world.
He's with them, he's separate, so he's with them. So,
When my father went to work for the Veterans Home, 68, and I was 3 years old, and one of the first, he took me to see where he worked, and then he took me to see Brownie's grave, and so that really hit me
Yeah.
as a young boy. And then my parents are buried there because my father was a World War II veteran, And so when we stop, we always stop and see mom and dad. We always stop and see Brownie. And one of the things I just wanted to share with everybody else and with you too, there's always coins on his grave. And I don't know if everybody knows the meaning of the coins on the grave, but other veterans and whether they served with or, you know, stuff, it's the different denominations of coins, but there's always a handful of coins on his grave.
Yeah.
So it's good to see that veterans are still appreciating him too.
In the wintertime, they put a wreath and somebody's put a raw shoe bone.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting too, the people that have reached out after a Madison newspaper did an article. I had been down in Madison and they had a Brownies puppy parade and we were on State Street and it was just something to do fun with the kids. But after the article went out, a gal from Racine sent me a letter. She's in her 90s and she said that her parents were from Switzerland, that they were immigrants and they ran a bakery. And they too had a German Shepherd mix named Brownie. And she said that her parents were so grateful to be American citizens and so grateful for the freedoms that they had. When they heard of this Dogs for Defense program, they felt they should donate their dog. And she was about 5 years old at the time, 5 or 6, and she said she went nuts. Her dad was on the phone with probably a regional recruiter trying to organize the transition of their dog, and she just, you know, made such a fuss that her dad hung up the phone. But so she wrote me this beautiful letter in beautiful penmanship for somebody in her 90s, which I thought was really cool. And then she signed it, her name, and then she put, and the almost Brownie, the war dog. And I thought that was really sweet. There was another lady that I'd made contact to, I believe she was in Sheboygan area, and her dad had a dog. He was stateside though, her family dog was with the Coast Guard, and he was guarding the ocean front, but on the state side. And her dog came back to live with them as well. But just interesting to talk to other people who've kind of been in these similar.
Uncle Orrin is not buried here in the cemetery. He's buried at Stevensville. My great-grandma and grandpa bought a farm out of Stevensville. You go past the cemetery up around down the curve, and on the left-hand side is an old farmhouse. It's different now, but they bought that, and that's where all the kids were born. And Uncle Orrin, too, he was the last. He had 2 boys, 2 girls, and Orrin was the baby. And the church needed extra land for the cemetery, Lutheran part of the cemetery. So Uncle Orrin and all of us will be buried on our old farmland overlooking the farm. So that's where Uncle Orrin is.
And Joan had made mention of this statue. So how that came to be, I just started thinking, like exactly what Joan was saying, where for children to learn of a story like this, they need many times something tactile, to see, to touch. And it started to form in my head that, wouldn't it be cool if we had a statue? And so I happened to see just in Google searches that there was a German Shepherd mix statue available, and I made contact with this company. It was out in Yonkers, New York. And it was a privately commissioned statue, but the couple, and it was for their dog Denali, that was a German Shepherd mix. And the couple had said to the statue company, if you ever want to use the mold again, feel free, it's okay. Well, just because it was there, they were able to, we didn't have to go through the expense, which would have been astronomical, to have it be an exact replica, but it was very close to Brownie's appearance. So it was just complete and delivered 2 weeks ago to King. So the base that it's going to be positioned on has already been poured, and they're going to be assembling it, or not assembling it, but installing it formally in the next few weeks when it gets a little warmer. And then on Friday, May 2nd, from 4 to 6, that is going to be the official statue dedication. So it will be a full military statue dedication. So very excited about that, and as Joan said, it's purposefully being put there. The Wisconsin Department of Veterans Affairs has been working with me to raise funds for that. We are down to the final $900 of the $10,000 that we needed for the statue. So I do have a jar out there in case anybody would want to put anything in the jar.
This is a Tuesday.
May 2nd.
Second, I'm sorry.
Yes, yep.
I did that wrong.
So it will be, like I said, it will be a full military program. The Veterans Department of Veterans Affairs is organizing all of that. So anyway, that's upcoming. So
What material is the statue made of?
So it's solid bronze, and then there is a kind of a chocolate brown patina coating that is covering the entire body. So, yeah, very excited about that. So I just think it will help kids piece things together. It's one thing to have a grave site, but for the kids to be able to see kind of the size that he was and maybe like the physical appearance, that will make an impression on them.
Kelly, is that gonna be located by the park area?
It'll be right where the commandant house is,
Yeah,
It's
right by
where
that
I-
sidewalk.
It's right where I proposed.
where she proposed, yes. Where
I
Joan was
remember
thwarted.
I was on the sled and we were going by the house.
That is a good
Yes.
logo.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought it was really cool too when I told Joan where they decided to put it. Then she got real teary because that spot meant so much to her. So and so many things that have come together with this book project just have really felt meant to be and like it was preordained. So it's been a real blessing to me. So thank you for coming. Is there anything else that I can answer? So John from the bookseller is in the back, and he will kindly sell any copies, and I will be back there as well if anybody would like me to sign their book. So thank you again.